Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Welcome to Trail Talk. I'm Edie,
And I am Mary.
and we are so glad you could join us today. We're kind of going, back to one of the tried and true lessons
Right,
today.
one of our
Mary.
originals.
Yeah. Oklahoma History Heroes, Volume 8. We're going to look at governors numbers 16 to 20.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. It's kind of interesting this time because we're starting to get into governors whose names I
More familiar,
recognize.
right,
Yes,
yeah.
people
More
that
current time.
I kind of have a bit vague memory of them actually serving. So, yeah. Anyway, giving away my age a little bit, but really, there's only been like, I can't remember now, 28.
I was going to say we're pretty close
I
to the
think
end of our government.
28
Yeah.
governors. Governor Stitt might be the 28th or something around that. So anyway, we're closing in. But another thing is that some of the crazy, controversial character guys that served early on for the state,
Right.
these guys are a little more
Low key.
yeah, low key.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good word for it. So
Or if they were crazy, they hit it well.
yes. Yeah. Precisely. So anyway, let's just jump in here. James Howard Edmondson, he went by Howard.
He looks like a very dapper gentleman.
He
there.
does, doesn't he?
Yes, that
He
square
does.
jawline.
And it seemed like there was another Oklahoma lawmaker named Drew Edmondson.
That name's familiar.
But I didn't
Don't know if
see
any relation.
anything that was a
Yeah.
relation. Anyway, he was our governor from 1959 to 1963. And born in Oklahoma, in Muskogee. Yeah,
He's
so,
an Okie from Muskogee.
yeah, probably, well, in 1925,
Right.
he was, which I thought it was kind of interesting. He became the governor when he was only 33.
That's young.
It is young. And when he was elected, he was the youngest governor in Oklahoma's
Right.
history to that date and in the nation.
Right. Not just the state.
Yeah, yeah. So I thought that made
What
me
an
feel like
accomplishment.
Oklahoma was being a little progressive,
Yeah.
to.
Ahead of our time.
Yeah, exactly. To elect someone who was young like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Graduated from Muskogee High School, attended the University of Oklahoma, but then joined the Army Air Corps, even though he joined in 42, but he never
He
went
went,
overseas
yeah, right.
to serve. That would have been in World War II. He married his childhood sweetheart in 1946, and they had a son and two daughters. So he returned to Muskogee and served as a law clerk for a federal judge before he joined a law practice.
Mhm.
And had an unsuccessful race for a seat in the legislature.
1950.
Yeah. And then he moved to Tulsa and worked as an attorney there, a very
Mhm.
successful
Yeah, he did.
attorney,
Several
actually.
convictions of corrupt county and state officials.
Yeah, so, he wasn't making any friends.
Exactly.
In the good old boy network,
That's
but
right.
I think he must have definitely earned respect of the people.
Right. So he was elected to the Tulsa County Attorney.
Yeah, in 54
Mhm.
and again in 56. So anyway, he announced his candidacy for governor in 57. Now the election would have been in 58.
And then he would have taken office in 50.
Right. But anyway, reform, that was his platform
Mhm.
was reform, okay? And he was all about changing things. And I think that a young,
New eyes, fresh ideas.
right, and he's like, hey, we're gonna change this up,
Mhm.
and people were ready for
Energetic, I'm
it.
sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so people were very excited for him. But I mean, shock, surprise, the old guard,
Right.
all of those legislators who'd been serving for a
Right.
while were not quite
They
so
weren't so-
keen on
yeah.
this young kid coming
Change
in.
isn't always good.
Yeah.
at all times
You're
there.
right, yeah. And so he promised to, I thought this was interesting. He was going to repeal prohibition, but and make it something that the people voted for. Instead of it being a legislative
state
decision,
mandated,
right,
yes or no.
right, yeah, he was gonna make it Oh, he is.
Drew
He's
Edmondson.
Drew Edmondson is his nephew.
Is also a nephew, the nephew of the former governor.
All right.
Okay,
Sure,
very
well, there you
good.
go.
Yeah, our
Fact checker.
fact checker, Tina, behind the camera is helping us out as always. Okay, so the uncle of Drew Edmondson, who was a future Oklahoma legislator of some sort. Okay. So anyway, so he was going to make he repealed prohibition, but to make it a vote of the people.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think I appreciate that let the constituents decide if
Right,
they
they
wanted
want it.
Oklahoma
Right.
to be
Dry or not.
a dry state, yeah. And, but while it was repealed, he enforced it. That was the way
He worked that.
yeah, and I mean, what a great, just upfront way to present that
Mhm.
idea to
Right.
people. And so people really had confidence in him. And it passed overwhelmingly, and Oklahoma came closer to being truly dry than ever before. And then they went on to the repeal of prohibition and a liquor control measure. Remember, I don't know when liquor by the drink became a thing in Oklahoma, but that was a thing, like people had to, you couldn't go and buy alcohol in
Like a bottle.
a bar,
Mhm.
but you could bring your own bottle, put it behind the thing, and they would serve you drinks that you had to buy. But that was liquor by the drink. It was
So you have to buy the bottle and then buy the drink.
yeah. It was kind of an interesting thing, and that wasn't even allowed in all counties. Every county was able to decide for
Whether they did
themselves
that
whether
way or
they
not.
did that. Yeah, I don't know everything about that, but I do remember that. It
interesting.
was when I was in college, it was still a
Sometimes they had
thing.
little Post-it notes on all these
I
little
yeah, I
bottles, like this
can't,
belongs.
yeah,
Did you have to pick it up before you leave?
I know, I can't remember how that worked, but anyway, that was a thing. And then you left with probably an open container.
Right.
So I think you had to have it like in a sack with some kind of writing
Closing
on it or
device,
something. Yeah.
Marked maybe. That's their how it
Anyway,
was.
yeah, it was kind of an interesting way to do that. So anyway, he did some other things. He persuaded the legislature to adopt a merit system, central purchasing, a withholding tax plan, housekeeping measures, and a financing plan for two turnpikes
Uh-huh.
and the Oklahoma Capital Improvement Authority. I mean, those
That's
were
a lot of
kind
stuff.
It
He's
is.
busy.
It
He's a
is.
busy little man.
And remember the earlier governors, they were like building roads.
Right.
Because there was no.
There was
not
no
even-
road.
Yeah, there wasn't even a highway
Mhm.
system. He started with the turnpikes,
Mhm.
so the toll
Right.
roads,
Right.
basically.
Right.
They were it was
Yeah,
a
it
shortcut,
wasn't.
but it gonna cost you money
Right,
to
to
take
get on
the
it.
shortcut.
Yeah.
So, anyway, he had other proposals which were rejected. Probably the old guys were like, okay,
Mhm.
enough
Right, you
already.
had enough.
Yeah. But he just kept trying to push everything through until he alienated himself from all of the legislators. And there has to be that give and take.
Yeah.
And so it made me think, how does a single term governor, because
Right. That was one
up
term.
until this time, it was still only one term
Mhm.
per person, so they could maximum serve 4 years
Right.
at a time.
Right.
How do you do that and not be a lame duck? Because if like the president or like a governor now, they can serve 2 terms.
Mhm.
A lot of times that second term, there's not a lot of leverage. And so they become lame duck. They are useless.
Right.
Their power is taken away from them. And I hadn't really thought about that being the situation, but essentially that's what happened
Right.
to Governor Edmondson. He became a lame duck because of how he alienated himself.
Everything, Yeah.
Yeah. So 2 weeks. Okay. They wanted to go back in, the legislators did, and change a lot of the things that he had
gotten
done.
through.
And so he managed to hold them off. And then 2 weeks before his term ended, our US Senator Robert S. Kerr died.
Right.
And so he proceeded to appoint himself
To the Senate seat.
to the Senate seat
Mhm.
and take Senator Kerr's spot.
Mhm.
And he had like 16
16
months
months,
left in office. So he extended not his term as governor, but
Right.
his term serving the state
Right.
by doing that.
Mhm.
Whoa,
I saw that.
that
too.
jumped. Okay, if our TV goes off, you guys stay with us because we will do some hatchet job stuff on this TV to get it back. So anyway, then he tried to run for that Senate
Mhm.
seat in 64 and he was defeated. Partly because the Kerr family and friends
Mhm.
were upset with him for not appointing Robert S. Kerr Jr. for
Right,
that Senate seat.
Right.
And so they and the Kerr organization and money put him
retire.
out. Yeah.
Real fast.
Yeah, and so shortly after he left office in 65, the
Mhm.
Senate office, he died of a heart attack in 1971.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was a young man
Yeah.
even then,
Yeah.
and but after his, well, before he was even 40 years old, he had done all of these things,
All
serving the
those things
state
for
of
the state.
Oklahoma, and in retrospect, even though he burned a lot of bridges,
Mhm.
the people recognized that
His
the
accomplishments.
reform that he brought was really good
Right. a
for the
positive
good.
thing for the
Mhm,
state.
yeah. So, okay, so here's an interesting little story. So Governor number 17 is George Nye. Now that name may be familiar to you. George Nye essentially was the governor, acting governor, 4 different times,
Right.
okay? And the first
And
time,
you're not hearing things strange. She
right,
didn't say that.
right, yeah. So let's give you a little backstory on George Nye. First of all, he was born in McAllister,
Mhm.
went to Eastern Oklahoma A&M at Wilburton. That's my husband's first alma mater. And then went to East Central in Ada, and then went back to McAllister and was a teacher. And then in 1950 at 23, he became the youngest member of the state legislature when he was elected to the House of Representatives from Pittsburgh County, where McAllister is. And in 53, he introduced the bill that made Oklahoma the official state song. Oh, let's look at George Nye.
There.
Sorry, Tina was trying to get my attention. And anyway, so this is a later picture of him.
Right.
Obviously, he's not 23 here.
Yeah, right.
But he, I mean, good on you, George Nye. Oklahoma as the official state song. I feel like that was one of the best nabs ever.
Oh,
That
I'm
was
sure.
so great for us to be able to grab that song.
Mhm.
So at 31, in 1958, he was elected lieutenant governor. So that would have been, he was Howard Edmondson's, James Howard Edmondson's attorney,
Mhm.
or lieutenant governor.
And that was the youngest in the state.
Yeah,
In
and the
nation
youngest in
also
the
at that
nation
time.
also, yeah. So he was 31. He failed in a bid for the governor's office in 62. So that would have been when Edmondson would have been trying to run for
Right.
reelection. So Nye, I guess, was the Democratic nominee
For that time.
for that time, but he was defeated by the next governor. Okay, so here's where it starts getting interesting. So we just told you that Robert S. Kerr died,
Mhm.
and that happened 2 weeks before Edmondson's time in office was to end.
Right.
So he leaves and goes to serve out the term of Senator
Senate.
Kerr.
Mhm.
And so there are 9 days where the lieutenant governor becomes the governor of the state of Oklahoma. So this is George Nye's first time to serve as governor. He is considered governor number 17. He served from January 6th to January the 14th of 1963. I find that to be a very funny turn of events.
Say, I was governor for
So,
9 days.
right. I mean, that is just crazy. And he didn't just sit in the office and twiddle his thumbs for 9 days. He went straight to work, okay? He fired and replaced the members of the Oklahoma Planning and Resources Board to facilitate the approval of an agreement with the federal government to build Arrowhead and Fountainhead lodges at Lake Eufaula. And where's Lake Eufaula? It's right down there by McAllister.
Right.
Yeah, he knew exactly, I mean, how providential
Mhm.
for him to have those 9 days. I'm not saying that those lodges would have never been built.
Right.
But I mean, we've talked about Lake Eufaula on Trail
Yeah,
Talk.
not too long ago.
Yeah, and so anyway, that was quite a thing. So then he left public office because he was not elected.
Right. His 9 days was up.
Yeah. Yeah, January 14th came around and someone else was sworn in,
That's
okay? So anyway, he left to start a public relations firm, and people around the state considered him
Most eligible bachelor in the state.
most eligible bachelor in the state. Think about it, in 1963, we could have had the bachelor,
That's right.
George and I,
That's right.
Oklahoma, former Oklahoma congressman or lieutenant government. So anyway, he had dated but never found a girl he wanted to marry until he was introduced to TWA ticket agent Donna Mashburn.
Yep.
And the rest
A few
we,
months later,
history.
married.
yep. And they had, she had a son
Yes.
who was 10, and then they had a daughter together named her George Ann. Now, there's a lot more to Governor
right.
Nye's story, but we're gonna save that for
We'll give it all
another
to you at
day.
once.
Yes, yeah, we don't want to give it all away. So, who was sworn in on January 14th, 1963?
Henry Bellman. And that
Henry
name's familiar to me.
Bellman, yeah, Henry Bellman. So Henry Bellman, he had a very long and illustrious life of political service
Yes.
for
good.
to the state of Oklahoma. He was born near Tonkawa, the son of a Cherokee Strip pioneer and farmer. And so his dad had 9 children from his
Ooh.
first marriage, and Henry was the first of 4 sons born to his second wife. Yeah.
That's a lot of
So
siblings,
I'm
brothers and
guessing
sisters.
he was one of 13.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a lot of kids.
Yeah. So he went to Billings High School and then enrolled.
Okay, and we're back.
Yeah, I might have touched the TV. Okay. Anyway, he went to Oklahoma A&M. Now it's Oklahoma State University,
In 38.
and got a Bachelor of Science degree in agronomy in 7 semesters. So I guess that was maybe a semester early.
Mhm.
And then in 42, he entered the Marine Corps.
Served during World War II.
Yeah, and he was something.
Yeah. This is
I
amazing.
mean, yeah,
In charge of the tank unit.
yeah, he was the first lieutenant in charge of a tank unit and saw a battle in, I don't know how to say,
Yeah,
Roy
that's the one I never
Namur,
knew.
Saipan. Obviously, he was in the Pacific. Well, what are that?
Like Iwo Jima.
Oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. The Pacific or the European. Oh, it has something to do with like show business. What do they call it? Those, it'll come to me.
Okay.
If you're watching, please someone type the word in and help me out.
I'm at a loss.
All right, well, Charlotte and David, we are glad you're watching today. If you know what that word is, I'm blank. What did they call it? Was the European or the Pacific of World War II? Man, it's right there. So anyway, he Saipan, Tinian, and Iwo Jima.
Mhm.
He was awarded the Legion of Merit for his efforts in Saipan and received the Silver Star for his valiant performance at Iwo Jima. Everyone knows Iwo Jima, one of the
Oh, that's
most famous,
Iconic, even.
iconic,
Yeah.
yes, statues of all
Mhm.
This is campaign,
campaign.
European.
Theater. Okay. The Pacific Theater or the European Theater
That is not anything
campaigns
I was
were-
thinking. I was thinking
yes.
Peninsula Coast.
I knew it would come to mind. Thank you for trying to help me out there. Yes, the Pacific Theater is
Okay.
where he would have been serving.
Okay.
So anyway, boy, that was a lot for that one
That
little word,
was.
wasn't it? I told
But
you
we
it had
got
something
there.
to
We
do with
got
show
there.
business. So then he returned to his family farm and was interested in public service and campaigned for the House of Representatives seat from Noble County, won in 46, but not again in 48,
Mhm.
and met and married Shirley Osborne. They had 3 daughters together. Then following the stint as a legislator, he went back to farming. Now remember his degree was agronomy.
Mhm.
So I think he had always been very interested. That
Right.
would have been something he
He was
grew up.
interested in.
Yeah, he grew up on a farm and that really held his interest. But that probably, I mean, I don't remember reading anything where he specifically did things to help farmers, but you know that someone who loves
Mhm.
farming and was so devoted to
And
it,
grew up that way in that
Uh-huh.
lifestyle.
that was always on the
Right,
forefront of
right.
his mind. So he went back to farming and soil conservation. He was named chairman of the Republican Party in 1960. But Democrats outnumbered Republicans in Oklahoma 5-1. Now,
Yeah.
we have seen a massive shift
Right.
in our state,
Since that time.
just a total flip flop.
Mhm.
But I mean, he was the first Republican governor
Mhm. And that
since
was in
statehood.
63.
Yeah, 1907 to 1963,
Mhm.
all Democrats.
That's right.
And so it was no surprise that, that the Republican Party had not really held any office
Right.
to speak
At
of.
all.
Yeah. But he was a different leader. And in 1962, he announced his candidacy for governor. So it's interesting what happened. It's kind of similar to the presidential race of recent times.
Mhm.
There were actually, 12 candidates who were trying to get
Right.
the Republican,
The
the
nomination.
Democratic nomination.
Democratic, right.
Oh, come back, please come back to us.
Bailey said it might be the HDMI cord.
Yeah, wiggle that cord cord up back there, Mary. Please.
Um,
Anyway, I'm gonna keep telling you about
You keep going. and
Henry.
I'll-
Yeah.
I'll be on.
So the Democrats were, disjointed. There were too many of them. And so he easily won the Republican nomination. And then he was able to gain attention, or I don't know if attention is the right word, but the Democrats became interested in what he was having to say. And so they were able to, okay. Everyone hold your breath. Viewers, hold your breath. Okay, anyway, so he was able to garnish a lot of Democratic votes
Mm.
and became the first Republican to be elected as governor of Oklahoma. It was quite an amazing, kind of an interesting story about how that all came to be. Yeah. And he won by 77,000 votes. So it wasn't even close.
Right.
I mean, this was like a
Right,
runaway.
exactly.
But the legislator was predominantly Democrats. I
Right.
mean,
So therefore.
it's it's the same thing
Mhm.
everywhere. So anyway, budgetary accountability was the hallmark of his administration. So he struggled to develop a state budget. He especially faced problems in financing the education department. He
Mhm.
thought cuts and reorganization were the answer. The teachers, though, wanted a salary increase,
Yes.
and the OEA and the NEA
They
both
voted
voted sanctions against the state because of that
Mhm.
thing that he was trying to do. And so the legislator increased education funding by adding a 1-cent cigarette tax
That's
in 1965.
So,
Cigarettes were a much bigger deal back then than they are today. One of the most pressing issues involved reapportionment of the legislature. So this is like what has happened this year in some states, literally gerrymandering has happened. I'm not going to specifically say that gerrymandering has happened here in the state of Oklahoma, but go look at some of those lines they drew this year. Just you decide for yourself how you feel about where the boundaries were drawn for the different what do they call them? The different like area, whatever those areas called, the Senate or whatever, number 50, like.
Oh, like the,
Anyway,
yeah.
boy, I am on it for vocabulary today, right? Anyway, okay, so but what was happening was, which is still happens today in Oklahoma, because of the large number of rural people, the rural population can control what happens in the state and leave out the urban population's desires, or
Vice versa.
If they redistrict,
Mhm.
then sometimes those urban districts.
I was gonna say, I think that's what you were
District.
looking, I was looking for C.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
said-
district is
yeah,
the
C.
word. Yeah, those urban districts
Right.
can control what happens in the state.
Mhm.
And so it's a careful balance that needs to be made. And there are just, there are a lot of things, like one proposal this year, I don't know if this passed or not, was that for a question to make it to a state ballot, there had to be a certain number of voters from every district or every county, I can't remember which one it said, in the state. Well, you can't, that's not always going to happen,
Right.
right? Because of the dense population versus the sparse population in different parts of the state. So, those are just little things that as constituents and people who live in the state of Oklahoma, we just kind of need to watch those things. But at any rate, the Supreme Court resolved that those redistricting did need to happen at that time. And so a fully reapportioned legislature convened in January with 1/3 of the representatives, I guess, coming from Oklahoma and Tulsa counties. So that meant they had more representation because the population was so much bigger there.
Right.
It's kind of, he emphasized new road construction, improving current roads, which,
How old have those roads have been?
almost 60 years later, they're still improving on those roads, aren't they? There's road construction.
Waiting for that approval.
Right. Man, we got to get around to it. He supported creation of the Human Rights Commission and the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission,
Mhm.
which I thought was fantastic because, we're home of 8 astronauts.
Right.
So that was important, especially this was about the time
Mhm.
when NASA
yeah.
and flights to
Right.
space and everything was taking off. So
Mhm.
that was very providential for him to be there and to
At that time.
establish
And the
that.
first retirement system for the state employees.
Oh, yeah, exactly, which that's been a huge
Still in
thing.
place.
Yeah. He left office in 1967, but then he became the national chairman for Richard Nixon's presidential campaign. By January 1968, Bellman had resigned the position. That was probably a good
It's a
move on his
short-lived,
part, yeah.
stint that-
And became, ran for Mike Mulroney's U.S. Senate seat, which he was elected to. And there at the national level, he served on just all of
All kinds
these
of different
boards,
boards
yeah. But he was experienced in the wheat and cattle business. And so Oklahoma's junior senator actively pursued the agricultural seat. Here we go. He understood farm programs and was instrumental in securing numerous pieces of agricultural legislation. I knew that had to be a part of his role
Right.
there in DC. Perhaps the most controversial issue involved busing to accomplish school integration.
Right.
So now this is
They
in
criticized
the
him.
late 60s and into the 70s.
Mhm.
And yeah, he was strongly criticized.
'Cause he supported that federal ruling.
Right, by U.S. Representative Ed Edmondson, who happens to be the brother of the Governor Edmondson that we talked about earlier. Mhm. So the whole thing about integration, I mean, it was a very heated issue
Mhm. Across the country.
across the country. These are the days of the civil rights marches and all of that. I mean, this was a time of real turmoil in our country. And because of where people lived
Mhm.
in Oklahoma City, children had to be bused all the way across the city to make sure that the populations of the schools were integrated equally.
Right.
And so, kids were going to more of a neighborhood type school before, and now they're going all the way across town. And so, I mean, I understand both sides of it. It was important for everyone to have an equal education,
Mhm.
but it was also important to parents that that education happened close to home. So, that was a
Yeah.
big, it was a big thing.
Right.
So anyway, he, then the busing issue and the fallout from Watergate, even though he stepped away from Nixon,
Right.
he was his campaign
Yeah.
manager and he was a Republican serving during that time. Nasty stuff. He did not win re-election. And rather than asking for a recount, he defeated Edmondson, but Edmondson didn't call for a recount. He took it to court
Uh-huh.
and got a favorable ruling there, and they seated, it was a favorable ruling for Bellman.
Right.
And so he got the seat in 76. His most significant contribution was on the budget committee and his commitment to fiscal responsibility. There was also some stuff with the Panama Canal treaties and something about, get this, that the Panama Canal would return to the people of Panama in the year 2000. Like that was a random date out there. Well, 22 years later. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, but after he left his service time in Washington DC, he returned to the farm, but then, served on different boards. In fact, the Cowboy Hall of Fame and Western Heritage Center was one of those.
Right.
And he was also director of the Oklahoma Department of Human Services for a time. So again, he was a true statesman.
Yeah.
As far as serving
And many things for the state.
yeah, a lot of good things in many different roles. But yeah, he was our 18th governor. Okay, so after he left, Dewey Bartlett was elected. Now, Dewey Bartlett was also a Republican.
Mhm.
And I found that very interesting that two Republicans would be elected, like that. But I thought he was kind of a born leader. He was born in Ohio, grew up there,
Right.
but he went to Princeton and was the senior class president.
Yeah.
I thought, okay,
That's kind of a
Yeah.
foreshadowing there.
yeah, his degree was in geological engineering, so yes, he was an oil man.
Right.
He would come to Oklahoma though and spend his
Like the
summers
redneck.
here, work. After college graduation, he trained at the Naval Air School in Norman and was a dive bomber pilot in the U.S. Marine Corps in World War II. And won an air medal for action against Japanese installations in the South Pacific.
Or dive bomber pilot.
Yeah, dive bomber.
It just sounds pretty.
Not
cool.
like a B-52,
Like,
dropping
Right.
those.
Yeah, just
big-
dropping them. Just dive bomb.
Yeah, dive bomb, man, it's crazy. Got married in 1945 to a lady from Seattle, Washington. They got
They
married
moved
in
here to Tulsa?
California. Yeah, they moved to Tulsa. In 1916, he had been sick with hepatitis and I don't know if he was just like kicked back at the house and said, I think I want to serve Oklahoma politics. So, because it just says he became interested in Republican politics while he was recovering from hepatitis. So I don't know, that sentence just made me curious about how that came about. So anyway, he served in volunteer positions and was elected to the Senate from Tulsa County in 1962 and introduced 23 bills. I mean, he went to Oklahoma
Yeah.
City and got to work.
He had a list already going.
Yeah, hepatitis didn't keep him
No, it
down.
did not.
He bounced back. So I thought this was interesting. He was a Catholic.
Mhm.
And this was the first time that religion was
Played a part of it.
played a role
Mhm.
in someone,
Their character, their upbringing.
right,
their-
right, yeah, their religious practices. Now, this was post John F. Kennedy. I can remember people telling me that when he was elected, that people were genuinely fearful that he was going to make Catholicism our national religion
Force that on
and
everyone.
enforce that on people, which was not the case at all, but that was a fear that people had. And so I don't know if people, if that kind of thought was in people's minds or
Mhm.
what, but once he was elected, the Washington Post called his victory the end of religious bigotry in Oklahoma. So maybe there was some kind of, I don't know, people, whether it was genuine or
Right.
people were just using it as, political,
That's
yeah,
like for their,
fodder.
right.
Yeah, for them to complain about things, I don't know. But after he was elected, he was a businessman, and so he brought his businessman ideas
Mhm.
to
The way of.
how he
Running
wanted to
Oklahoma.
run the state.
Uh-huh.
Now, he was kind of completely the opposite, though, as far as education, wasn't he? Isn't he the one
He was-
who, he made education the cornerstone of his platform.
Mhm.
And so it's like a complete 180
Yeah.
from the previous
Right.
Republican, but he reminded voters that out of every 100 Oklahoma children who entered school, this was a day of the time, but this
Mhm.
statistic made me sad. Only 61, this is how out of every 100 that started school, only 61 would graduate high school and only 15 would go on to college.
Mhm.
Now, I get it. These are the 60s and
Different times,
70s,
right.
but my goodness, those numbers are appalling.
Mhm.
That was where we were in
That
our
time,
state
yeah.
at that time. My goodness. Anyway, so yeah, he won the election, and he worked with his ideas from the private sector and everything, and resulted in a $20 million in annual savings in the budget for state agencies and commissions, which is amazing. Overhauled the judicial system and elimination of the justice of the peace system. And voters approved new district courts in 67. Okay, Bartlett's tenure was his biggest accomplishment was support of common education. Legislative appropriations for common schools, that's your local elementary, middle, high
Right.
school, increased by 89% over the 4 years he was in office.
That is,
I mean, I'm
that's
just
jaw
like,
dropping.
slow clap for Dewey Bartlett. That
Right.
is, I mean, how impressive is that? And he believed the well-trained workforce would attract industry to Oklahoma. And I mean, hello. Yes, that is so
Mhm.
amazing. Anyway, he didn't win re-election. I wonder if Oklahomans were just like, oh, I forgot. When Henry Bellman was governor in 1966, that's when the constitution of the state was changed to allow
For
two-term
two-terms,
limits.
too.
So he would have been the first.
To-
Well, I don't know how that fell as far as Bellman's bid for reelection, like if it passed before he
Or
would
after
have
his
been
time up.
able, or after he would have already had to let
Step
someone
away.
else
Right.
start running for
Right.
office.
Right.
Anyway, so it's possible he was the first one who could have won a two-term election.
Yeah.
And, everybody's like, what's wrong with one term? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what people
That ain't
thought.
broke, don't fix
Yeah.
it.
I was, in first grade. So what I didn't have any say in any of this. But anyway, he ran for US Senate in 72. Bartlett did, and had tremendous influence on behalf of the Oklahoma constituents. And he took a trip to South Vietnam and Cambodia. Now, this would have been during
75.
the Vietnam War. He went in 75, and he led the Senate in supplementary military assistance to South Vietnam and medical and food aid to Cambodia. So he was moved by what he saw over there. They could have been, I can't remember what year the Vietnam War ended.
77 or 78.
Yeah, that's probably true. But anyway, he was a great 75. Okay, it ended in 75. So this was probably post-war
Right.
South Vietnam and Cambodia.
Right, kind of.
Shout out to
Rebuilding.
Emery, our other statistician, fact checker back there for us. Anyway, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, and he died in 1979, just before his 60th birthday.
Yeah.
So, and then we have Governor David Hall, and this name is very familiar to me. I was in elementary school, and that name just, it's someone I remembered. He was from Oklahoma City, graduated from Classen High School, president of the student body, went to OU, worked hard to put himself
Waited
through school.
tables, worked in a clothing store.
Yeah.
And had other jobs as well.
Yeah, he briefly attended Harvard University and then came back to Tulsa and finished law school there. Met his wife on a blind date, and they got married and had 3 kids together. So he was Tulsa County attorney from 62 until he ran for the Democratic nomination for governor in 66.
Now back to Democrat.
Yeah, back to Democrats. He had successfully prosecuted 940 out of 1,000 criminal cases. I mean,
That's
this
quite a
guy,
record.
yeah. And after 4 years of private practice, he announced his candidacy. So he didn't get the Democratic nomination
Right.
in
66.
66, yeah, but in 70 he did. And his campaign slogan was Hall of Oklahoma for all of Oklahoma.
That's catchy.
That's catchy. So he also was concerned, I told you how Bellman won by 77,000
Yeah.
votes. Bartlett won by 2,181
The narrowest
votes.
margin.
Yeah, closest gubernatorial race in state history. But his tax reforms put Oklahoma back on a sound financial basis.
Mhm.
And he had a great concern for education and resulted in major efforts to increase per pupil expenditures and bring teacher salaries up to the regional average. Now, let's
And
just
made
think about this for a
public
minute.
schools class size smaller as well.
Oh, yes, yeah. So Governor Bellman Governor Bartlett had increased the funding for schools, common schools, by 89% over 4 years. And yet teachers' salaries were still
Remained
below
the
the
same.
regional average
Mhm.
following that. And so,
And he brought up-
that is just astounding to me. Wow. But anyway, Governor Hall, really, that was important to him. Also, the penal system, the situation with the penitentiaries
Right.
in Oklahoma were something that he was passionate about. And so he appropriated a major increase in prison funds in 1973.
Right.
However, before they,
those could be implemented.
yeah, in July of 1973 was the McAllister prison riot.
Mhm.
Now, we're going to jump into the McAllister prison riot really quick, but they took 20 hostages, including a deputy warden, and they were armed with knives and meat cleavers. I guess they raided the kitchen.
Right.
And held prisoners and National Guardsmen at bay for 22 hours while Governor Hall worked on negotiations.
$20 million in damage.
Yeah, they set fires. I've got some pictures here.
It was the worst riot, left 3 inmates dead also.
Yeah, I mean, this is just, I guess they tried to
That's
burn that place
terrifying.
to the
I mean, that's just
ground.
terrifying.
It really is. It is. So a little bit about what happened, what brought this about. Overcrowding was probably
Right,
number one.
Right.
So
It was only housed for 1,100 inmates.
Yeah, and it exceeded
Yeah,
2,200.
so 100%
Yeah,
overcrowded.
overcrowding, exactly. Now, Governor Hall refused to sign parole recommendations for drug offenders and individuals convicted of violent crimes. And so that did not decrease
Right,
anything. It
right.
was, that was increasing overcrowding. I mean, that's a similar situation. That's why Oklahoma has privately owned prisons today, because our state prisons
They're
were
so
so
overrun.
overcrowded. There was plenty of room. But it's also the fact that our laws would place drug offenders in prison, and they are not like violent
They're not violent,
offenders.
yeah.
Yeah, and so that was one of the things Governor Stitt did was, you know, he released a
nonviolent
large number,
offenders.
yeah, of prisoners. But on July 27th, 1973, the prison exploded into violence. Inmates in the mess hall, they went and got stuff in the
Right.
kitchen, stabbed two of the guards.
Mhm.
They were later treated at the hospital. A prison official, Jack Hall, and Deputy Warden Sam Johnston both attempted to help, but were attacked and taken as the first hostages. And then 21 were held altogether. And then the first death happened. L. Woodrow Lee Brooks was stabbed and beaten to death by fellow prisoners. It doesn't say why.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't have any idea what prompted that. And then 25 minutes later, the place was burning.
Right.
They had set the prison on fire. Now, their demands,
Yeah.
they wanted total amnesty for the ringleaders of the riot. They wanted media coverage, and they
Mhm.
wanted access to the U.S. Justice Department and the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union attorneys. They did release the hostages, but the fall, 5 days later, they released hostages but retained control of the prison until August the 4th. So this was a very long riot and I guess takeover. But there was a task force convened on August the 7th and determined the fate of the McAllister prison. I mean, at one time they thought we're just gonna have to dose it
Close it,
and
yeah.
it'll be closed
Right,
forever.
right.
There will not be any. But they decided instead to make it only a maximum security prison for 500 to 300 inmates.
Right. And the personnel had to be
And
improved.
yeah, and
service training.
because some of the complaints that the inmates had was the way they were treated
Treated,
by the
right,
guards.
Right.
And you know, there have been movies and TV shows made about how prison guards mistreat
Mhm.
prisoners and things like that. So I think that there are two sides to this situation. One is that obviously there is a sense of power and
In the
control that you would have as a guard in that situation. And these people have done something that they are not allowed to be in society.
They've lost.
They're in there for a reason. Yeah, they've
Right.
lost that privilege.
Right.
The other side of it is that
They're still human beings.
they're still human beings, and there is always appropriate training to help people learn how to do a job like that
Mhm.
without letting that power kind of take control
Right.
of their
Right.
actions.
Right.
And that was probably the failure to a degree, is that proper training had not taken place.
Right.
And then, of course, you have your pay and all of that kind of stuff
That plays into all of that.
that
as
plays
well.
into it, yeah.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, the reforms that Governor Hall
Taking place.
wanted were definitely needed. And it's just a
Probably
shame
overdue.
that they didn't happen before
Before all
this,
this.
before this happened. Anyway, before the provisions were implemented, they were never really implemented.
Right.
This task force recommendation was never really implemented. And in 74, an inmate named Bobby Battle, an African-American who was
At the
McAllister
present time.
won a lawsuit against Warden Park Anderson and the Oklahoma Department of Corrections for alleged cruelty and discrimination. And a district court judge, Luther Bohannon, that's also a name that I recognized, and I didn't look up why I recognized his name, but he had been in the news, obviously, for many things. He ruled in favor of Battle and handed down a written opinion listing 43 orders to corrections officials concerning the minimum standard
Minimum.
for prisoners' medical care, housing, and safety. And another riot did occur in 1985
In December.
in December, yeah. So Governor Hall, then, he did run for a second term. But
In
he,
74.
yeah, in 74, he was defeated. And then 9 days after his term, he was indicted by a grand jury on
Yeah.
4 charges of bribery and extortion. I know, it's bad. He claimed innocence, but he was convicted of bribery in March of 1975 and served 18 months in a federal correctional institution in Arizona. Fortunately, they did not send him to McAllister.
Right.
Yeah. He was released and he moved to California and lived until 2016.
Yeah.
So
In La Jolla.
yeah, La Jolla, California, yeah. So, anyway, you can't go through 5 governors in Oklahoma without something kind of crazy going on.
Little, yeah.
Yeah,
More
something,
craziness.
yeah, I don't know. But anyway, there you have it, people. Oklahoma's governors number 16 through 20. We'll have another couple of lessons on those,
We can
guys.
Make our way to the end.
Yeah, I mean, we still call them Oklahoma history heroes
Yeah.
because good, bad.
They made
what-
history.
They made history and they're a part of who we are today.
Made Oklahoma what it is.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully I'll have my vocabulary a little more in check next time. And tomorrow, Billy Stratton, who is
Main
the
Street.
new executive director of Main Street Duncan, is going to be our special guest. So you don't want to miss this. Billy's brand new and she's got a bunch of great ideas and stuff, and we want to hear all about that. So plan to be here at 3 o'clock. And until then,
Happy
happy
trails.
trails.